Studies. My name is Alexander Clem. I'm the elected Executive Director of the nonprofit academic organization, the Southeast Asian Media Studies Association, by many of you known as SEAMSA, and the Managing Editor-in-Chief of the Southeast Asian Media Studies journal, SEAMSJ. Thank you very much for inviting me to deliver these opening remarks. This webinar is co-organized by 4 entities. They are first, the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, second, the Media and Democracies Special Interest Group of the Southeast Asian Media Studies Association. This special interest group is headed by Professor Kim Fajardo. Third, the Communicator, and fourth, the Polytechnic University of the Philippines Journalism Guild. Thank you to everyone in these 4 entities who has been involved in organizing this important event. We are here today to celebrate the World Press Freedom Day 2023 because we are all interested in the topic of press freedom and democracy in general, and particularly in Southeast Asian nations. In fact, we all know very well how much press freedom affects us individually and on communal and national levels. Freedom of the press is a precious good that concerns all of us and that is worth fighting for. I would like to thank our 6 distinguished speakers who will discuss and give us their take on the current state and the future of journalism, press freedom and democracy in the Philippines and in Southeast Asia. They are Manny Mogato, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and editor-at-large of OneNews, Kathyrine X. Cortez, Vice Chairperson of the National Union of Journalists in the Philippines, Archie Bergosa, Editor-in-Chief of Explained, John Robert de Castro, Editor-in-Chief of The Catalyst, Sharona Nicole Semilla of the PUP Journalism Guild, and Randolph Aaron Rezueño of the Communicator. I'm very much looking forward to their thought-provoking paper presentations and discussions. I've been living in Bangkok since 2005, and there, over the last 2 decades, I have experienced 2 coups d'etat and many other political upheavals that have been reported by citizen journalists and the mass media in Southeast Asia and have affected press freedom and democracy in Thailand. One of Thailand's immediate neighbors is Myanmar. After the 2021 coup there, many Burmese journalists and other media practitioners were forced to leave their home and to settle in Bangkok, from where they continue their struggle for press freedom and democracy in their homeland. As you can see, Bangkok is an important Southeast Asian hub where press freedom and democracy, not only of Thailand, but also of other Southeast Asian nations, such as Myanmar, are discussed and negotiated, won and lost, and won back again by courageous journalists, media networks, and private citizens. In the webinar today, I'm eager to learn more about the Filipinos' fight for press freedom and democracy in their beautiful Southeast Asian nation. Let me end my opening remarks with a quotation by Walter Cronkite Jr., an American broadcast journalist who served as an anchorman of the CBS Evening News and a journalist who experienced World War II, the Vietnam-American War, 9/11, and most other 20th century and early 21st century national and international conflicts, crises, and tragedies that have shook our pillars of press freedom and democracy. Cronkite once said, "Freedom of the press is not just important to democracy, it is democracy." With this credo in mind, let us use this webinar to express our joy that we can celebrate together World Press Freedom Day 2023. Now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Hamadi Esmora, the Dean of the PUP College of Communication. Thank you all and enjoy this webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander J. Clem, for that opening statement.
Good day to all of you. Today, we get to celebrate World Press Freedom Day, a hallmark in history that serves as an avenue for us to promote press freedom in our nation and in our institution. Press freedom goes hand in hand with citizens' freedom to access to information, says Borges Namire from Mozambique. But for journalists to be able to defend this democratic right, they need security and space to do their jobs. As a High Representative Borrell stated, press freedom is not just a right of media professionals, but of each and every one of us. Carmen Aristegui from Mexico, Maria Ressa from our own nation, the Philippines, and Pascalina Cabi from Lesotho. All of them suffered from either intimidation or imprisonment or even loss of their jobs. Being a journalist comes with a high price in a lot of countries, says Luna Safwan from Lebanon. Press freedom means reporting and telling the truth, even if the truth is not accepted by society, says Neville Choi from Papua New Guinea. Yet all over the world, there are journalists who lost their lives simply for fulfilling their call of duty. Facts matter. It's true that the way we share and consume information has advanced and become more complex with the emergence of the digital and online media. But in the information space, not all players follow the rules of truth and integrity. We need objective, independent, trustworthy, and qualitative reporting against the noise of deceiving messages spread with malign intent. Let all who uphold press freedom be truth tellers and crusaders against disinformation. Rudy Branks, a Belgian reporter, remarked that for decades he has traveled to conflict zones to report on what happened. According to him, there lies and deceit are a daily reality. He believes that journalists should form an antidote for the benefit of humanity. Let truth be written, let truth be spoken, and let truth be heard. I personally agree that eventually the truth shall set us all free. The voice of our media workers are our own voice. When media remains silent, it is like societies themselves are muzzled. Without journalism, the world would be absolutely blinded, with no access to freedom of opinion and no right to be informed, says Alhagi Manka, producer, director, and photographer in Gambia. Today, I uphold the same rallying chant of every media worker, every journalist, every broadcaster, every reporter, and every student of communication. We defend press freedom. And so again, we thank and welcome our speakers for today, who are themselves staunch advocates of press freedom. To everyone watching, let us all be inspired and be fueled by their insights.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander J. Clem, the Executive Director of SEAMSA, and Dr. Hemedy S. Mora, the Dean of the PUP College of Communication, for those striking speech regarding press freedom. Press freedom is exercising democracy, And this is why we are here today celebrating press freedom in solidarity with more than 100 of journalists all across the globe. Hindi na tayo papahuli pa. Ngayon ay papakilala ko na si Larizel J. Morada mula sa The Communicator upang ipakilala ang ating esteemed guest para sa araw na ito.
Magandang hapon sa lahat. So, I am Larizel Morada and I am the editor of The Communicator. So, this afternoon, I am honored to be with you today and to have the chance to introduce our guest speakers who are prominent journalists from various independent media outlets that have been catalysts of free expression and who have worked in the industry for many years. So, it is with a special excitement that I am pleased to welcome Mr. Manny Mogato, a Pulitzer Prize winner and the editor-at-large of OneNews PH. We also have Ms. Kathyrine X. Cortez, the Vice Chairperson of the National Union of Journalists in the Philippines. We also have Mr. Archie Bergosa, the Editor-in-Chief of Explain PH. And lastly, we also have Mr. John Robert de Castro, the Editor-in-Chief of The Catalyst. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our fearless speakers who will discuss the enabling elements of freedom of expression and reminds us that press freedom represents the very lifeblood of human rights. Thank you so much.
Let's give a round of applause to our esteemed guests. Ayan, palakpakan naman tayo sa ating Zoom room ngayong araw na ito. Ayan, dahil mga batikan and at the same time, esteemed guests yung ating kasama dito sa Breaking Barriers. At talagang mabibreak natin ang barriers ngayong araw mula dito sa ating talakayan. Before we get to the gist of what we will be talking about, let's talk about breaking barriers. Two words that perceive big challenges for young journalists like me in the future of journalism. We ask our beloved speakers, why do we break these barriers in celebration of the 30th World Press Freedom Day? Each speaker will have their momentous time for their opening statement for today. We call on Mr. Manny Morato. Kumusta po kayo, sir, ngayong araw? Happy Press Freedom Day po.
Ako sa lahat, no? Ako'y nasiyan at ako'y naimbitan nyo sa isang mahalagang pagpupulong. No? Thank you for the invitation, no? To be one of your speakers. Today is a very important day, no? World Press Freedom Day. And I wish to congratulate the organizers, UP, the Southeast Asia Media Studies, and the Journalism Guild for this wonderful forum. Journalism is under threat. Newsrooms across the world are shrinking. Technology has changed it. 4 days ago, I felt nostalgic after reading a Facebook post shared by a fellow traveler, Jason Gutierrez, the Manila-based correspondent for the New York Times. It was actually an opinion piece written by a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, Maureen Dowd, about the death of the newsroom. She wrote about the busy and raucous newsrooms in the 1980s, where the reporter's desk littered with cigarette butts, spilled coffee and beer, and stacks of old files. There were a lot of conversations and shouting as editors found out crappy reporters. Fast forward today, newsrooms are more sterile and empty. Since the coronavirus pandemic, journalists stare at their computer screens alone, normally at home. The friendly drinks, bunkers, and exchanges are gone. I shared Maureen's experiences. I started my journalism career in the 1980s, before computers and mobile phones, the internet, and social media. The click-clacking of teletype machines and typewriters were music I really do not know how we could work in such a noisy environment with TV and radio blaring and the People's Journal newsroom smelling of newsprint and ink. But that was not the only thing I miss most. That was the time when the public trusted journalists. Every printed word was gospel truth, and the public applauded when journalists exposed corruption and scandals in high places. There was freedom of expression. The press is free despite efforts by the government to muzzle and silence journalists after martial law was imposed in 1972. A group of Filipino journalists working for international news agencies like Gabi Tabunyar of CBS, Teddy Benigno of AFP, and Nelson Dayan of New York Times organized the Foreign Correspondents Association of the Philippines, or FOCAP, to carry the torch of fighting for press freedom. Today's new breed of FOCAP members and journalists for local news organizations continue to soldier on, and they face the same threats experienced by those during martial law. There was democratic space after EDSA, but journalists continue to face harassment, threats, intimidation, and physical harm, including deaths. The Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility, CMFR, and the National Union of Journalists in the Philippines, NUJP, have documented nearly 190 killings of journalists since 1986. Laws have been weaponized to muzzle freedom of the press and expression. Journalists have to deal with libel laws and now the new anti-terrorism law, as critical journalists are routinely red tagged. But my biggest fear is not the harassment, threats, and intimidation. I considered it part of the job. The biggest problem now is the loss of credibility, public trust. In 2020, a Reuters Institute survey showed public trust on media in the Philippines was a low 27%, one of the lowest in the world. It was below the global average of 42%. It has improved to 37% last year when people started returning to legacy media for news and information about the pandemic. But there is still polarization as the public do not trust the media when it comes to political stories. The labeling of journalists as biased, dilawan, bayaran, had affected credibility. The same Reuters Institute survey showed Filipinos consume news and information not from traditional media outlets like social media, like newspapers, no, but from social media like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok, where misinformation and disinformation were widespread. Technology and social media, in a way, became a burden. Journalists, as catalysts of freedom of expression, must first restore public trust in legacy media. It is not an easy task. It is everyone's responsibility to counter disinformation and misinformation. Earlier, I mentioned about shrinking newsrooms across the world as revenues from advertising that support quality journalism are also declining, leaving a vacuum filled by disinformation. Now is a time for the reform in the tech industry. Our modern information environment, which rewards engagement above all else, is perfect for someone to succeed unless we make fundamental change in this system. Modern online disinformation exploits the attention-driven business model that powers most of the internet as we currently know it. Platforms like Google and Facebook make staggering amounts of money grabbing and capturing attention so they can show paid advertisements. That attention is gained using algorithms that measure what content we engage with and automatically show us more content like it. The problem emerges when these algorithms automatically recommend and amplify our worst tendencies. As humans, we evolved to respond more strongly to negative stimulus rather than positive ones. These algorithms detect that and reinforce it, selecting content that sends us down increasingly into negative rabbit holes. Fighting disinformation and misinformation requires holding tech companies accountable, strengthening privacy and antitrust laws. As individuals, we can also do our share by supporting quality journalism. Let us help journalists become real catalysts of freedom of expression by pushing back government from imposing repressive laws and spreading misinformation and disinformation. Thank you for listening, and I hope to listen to more of our speakers this afternoon. Thank you. Mabuhay.
Mabuhay po kayo, Sir Manny Mogato. Sa inyong ibatid ngayong araw, you have narrated, since history, since the dictatorship of the Marcos Sr. administration, as well as the martial law. You have narrated how several administrations that passed have defaced and orchestrated the public trust of the Filipino people to the media. And that is why there is this loss of credibility that we challenge now as journalists and as young journalists who are starting themselves inside their schools. So it is one of the biggest challenges that we face today in this celebration of the press freedom. Now, we may call on Miss Kathyrine Cortez. Hello po, ma'am. Kumusta po kayo? Happy Press Freedom Day po.
Yes, happy Press Freedom Day sa lahat. Hi, sir. Yeah, happy Press Freedom Day, sir. Okay, so in behalf of NUJP, I would like to read also our statement for today's Press Freedom Day. So this is my opening statement, I guess. This is also I think yung pinaka-proper na sabihin after hearing Sir Manny Mog's statement. So yeah, on Press Freedom Day, we insist on being free. Nearly a year into the Marcos Jr. presidency, as a dominant media adjust to reporting on an administration that is not openly hostile to press, it is tempting to consider that maybe the situation for media workers has improved and will continue improving. On World Press Freedom Day, we remind ourselves that while there have been victories, like in court with the acquittal of Maria Ressa and Rappler of tax cases, for example, far too many of us are still facing threats and our freedom is still fragile. It has been more than 3 years since our colleague, Frenchie Micompio, was arrested in a raid in Tacloban City. Frenchie, who had been red tagged and subjected to surveillance before her arrest on questionable charges based on testimony from questionable witnesses, is still fighting terrorism-related cases and is appealing the forfeiture of money meant to fund her radio show that the government said was to finance terrorism. The slow pace of the case, especially in contrast with the quick resolution of other, more high-profile ones, is a violation of her right to a quick trial and also deprives the communities on Negros Island that she used to report on and for. The theme of this year's Press Freedom Day commemoration is freedom on expression as a driver for all human rights, and the passage of the Anti-Terrorism Act and SIM card Registration Act restricts that freedom from which the freedom of the press comes. Frenchie is just one case to show how that can be done and is being done. Since the Duterte administration, there have been attempts to convince colleagues to disaffiliate from groups like the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, and outright attempts to paint the independent and the alternative media or the alternative press as enemies of the state. While these attempts have been toned down under the new administration, they have continued. Attempts to organize within our ranks and among citizens in general are viewed with suspicion, if not vilified outright. Policies to block public access to critical websites like Bulatlat and Pinoy Weekly have not been reversed, and there are moves in Congress seeking to penalize fake news, a term that is used to mean disinformation and misinformation, but that has increasingly come to mean views and reports that are inconvenient to government. And in the backdrop of all these hangs the threat of the use of tactics that the Duterte administration used against the Philippine Daily Inquirer, Rappler, and ABS-CBN that continue to chill out community. In the backdrop as well are the unresolved murders of our colleagues, with Renato Blanco and Percy Lapid being only the latest of these. On the World Press Freedom Day, and despite all these, we remind ourselves that we will continue to insist on being free. Dahil salamat, mayang hapon.
Maraming salamat po, Ms. Kathyrine Cortez, Ms. Kat. Maraming salamat po sa inyong mga naibanggit, no, regarding na lamang po no, sa continuous fight ng alternative media, and at the same time, we insist of being free as journalists. There is a lot more challenges that we face up until now, from the physical coverages up until to the online releases that have been purposely taken down. That's why we here tumitindig tayo at magkakasama. Kaya yun, maraming salamat po, Ms. Kat. Next naman po ay tinatawag natin si Mr. Archie Bergosa for his opening statement. Hello po, Sir Archie.
So hello, good afternoon everyone. So thank you for inviting me here. So in behalf of Explain PH, isang taas na moong pagbati sa ating lahat ngayong ating pinagdiriwang ang World Press Freedom Day. Okay, so to start with, I would like to focus on how the current press freedom challenges are affecting the youth sector, especially those who are just starting as a journalist and those who are in the campus media and the campus publication. So, but before that, I would like to offer a moment of silence for those who have been a victim of media oppression, especially those journalists who were killed during the past year, 2022. Last January 12, si Jaynard Angeles, April 15, si Jana Villegas, June 29, si Federico Gempesao, September 18, si Renato Blanco, and last October 3, yung pinaka-latest si Percy Lapid. We are condemning this killing sa journalist as a blatant attack, and we see this as a blatant attack to press freedom. So earlier, the Reporters Without Borders released our current standing on the Press Freedom Index. So it shows na nag-improve tayo from 147 on 2022 from now to 132. So despite these improvements on the ranks, we still view genuine press freedom as something that we are far behind of. So why? Because we believe that until now, or we know that until now, journalism is still under attack. So first, the blurring line in between the narratives. So social media is very noisy, and there are this shifting narratives wherein there's something na tama, there's something na sinungaling, and then the sad part is ang laging nananalo yung pali and yung sinungaling. So that's why sinabi niya na lies spread faster than facts. So this narrative shifts I fueled from disguised propaganda efforts funded from state machinery, so trolling, and then next, the weaponization of mistrust, the view of journalism as something na bias or di o pagkakatiwalaan, just like sinabi ni Sir kanina. Again, by state-sponsored attacks and by media manipulation. And then next, the media downplay. There's this lack of acknowledgement for critical media. Those na nagiging critical sa media ay hindi binibigyan ng access sa mga coverages. At some point, yung nangyari nga, last administration o kay Duterte where tinanggalan yung Rappler ng access sa Malacanang. So there's this access restrictions. And then diminishing reach, social media algorithms, and less interactions. And then next, targeted attacks, wherein it actually threatens the journalist's safety, and it driven by political motives. So recently, us in UPLB Perspective was attacked by NTF-ELCAC saying na we're fake news because of a certain article on Rizal, on some issue here na Southern Tagalog. So isa lang yun sa halimbawa ng threat to safety, especially for those who are working in the media scene. So with that, sinasabi sa theme ngayon ng ating World Press Freedom Day ay yung freedom of expression, wherein isa ito sa mga challenges na kinakaharap natin as a journalist, especially those who are working on the media setting and those who are on the front lines of media. So with that, we stand for press freedom, we stand for truth, despite this journalism attacks, especially the shifting narratives wherein I think babahagi or mas mapapalawak natin mamaya sa ating discussion. So again, we stand for all journalists around the world. We condemn state killings, especially for those who are journalists. We stand for justice, for those na inatake ng Estado, especially, and we stand na sana palayain yung ating mga colleagues, especially si Archie, other political prisoners, and other mga journalists na continuously na nire-red tag ng ating state. So with that, I'm ending my opening statement. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Archie Bergosa, for that opening statement. Throughout the years, dumadami yung mga cases ng mga press violations, especially campus journalists, lalo na sa umiigting na pagbaliwala sa digital security. And not only that, ay yung surveillances and lumalalang red tagging. And at the same time, we inspire ourselves as journalists to those journalists, our colleagues na patuloy na lumalaban, kahit sila ay mga bilanggong politikal, sapagkat hinog yung mga batayan, ang mga rason kung bakit nga ba, kung sino nga ba ang nagpo-prolong ng mga fabricated cases against the press rather. So next naman po ay tinatawag natin ang Editor-in-Chief ng The Catalyst na si John Robert de Castro para sa kanyang opening statement.
Ayan.
Robert.
Thank you, Brel. Greetings of peace in the name of the democratic press. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for allowing me to speak here in behalf of the official student publication of Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Santa Mesa. Allow me to read the official statement of our publication written in Filipino language. Sa isang ilusyong demokrasya na ibinibigay sa atin ng lipunan sa ilalim ng lideratong Marcos, nananatili ang pagpaslang, pagpapatahimik, atake, red tagging, at malalang kultura ng impunidad sa bansa sa hanay ng mga manggagawang media. Nananatiling walang imik ang rehimeng US Marcos sa magkakasunod na atake sa mga mamamahayag. Sa katunayan, sa loob ng unang 100 araw ni Marcos Jr. sa panunungkulan, ay may 16 na naitalang kaso ng paglabag sa malayang pagbabalita ang administrasyon nito at patuloy pang humahaba ang listahan nito ayon sa ulat ng National Union of Journalists in the Philippines. Kabilang rito ang lumalabas sa magkasunod at magkahiwalay na kaso ng pagpatay sa mga radio broadcaster na si Renato Ray Blanco at Percy Lapid Mabasa. Ilang buwan pa lamang mula nang magsimula ang rehimen ni Marcos, nakatanggap din ng mga pisikal na banta at mensahe ang mga kilalang mamamahayag gaya ni na JP Soriano, Ed Linga, Lord De Vera, Adrian Ayalin at iba pa. Habang kasama rin sa listahan ng mga napatay na mamamahayag sa ilalim ng Administrasyong Marcos ay si Benhar Capote, isang guro at award-winning editorial cartoonist sa Sultan Kudarat. Kung susuriin sa pagiging kritikal na paraan ng pagbabalita ang dahilan kung bakit nakakaranas pa ng banta ang mga nabanggit na mamamahayag. Sa patuloy pa na censorship at pambablock ng website sa mga alternatibong media gaya ng Bulatlat at Pinoy Weekly. Manifestasyon ito ng patuloy na pagkitil ng mga pwersa ng Estado sa karapatan sa malayang pamamahayag. Kamakailan lamang ay nakatanggap din ng banta ng pagkawala ng kanilang mga official pages ang mga campus publications gaya ng SINAG, Manila Collegian ng UP Manila, at aming publikasyon ng PUP The Catalyst kasabay ng pagtanggal ng meta sa kanilang mga balitang naglalaman ng ulat hinggil sa pagkamatay ni Communist Party of the Philippines founder Joe Masison. Hanggang sa kasalukuyan, hindi pa rin nakakalaya ang mga mamamahayag na sina Frenchie May Cumpio matapos ang 3 taong pagkakakulong nang sampahan siya ng walang matibay na ng gawa-gawang mga kaso. Si Cumpio at ang mga mamamahayag ng bansa mula sa campus pahayagan hanggang sa pambansa ay biktima ng intimidasyon, karahasan at impunidad. Manifestasyon na ang kalagayan ng pamamahayag sa Pilipinas ay nananatiling tikom sa ilalim ng rehimen na ito. Sa lokal na konteksto, nariyan ang usapin ng burokratikong proseso ng pagkuha ng pondo ng mga publikasyon gaya ng The Catalyst, The Communicator, at marami pang publikasyon sa buong PUP system. Nandyan din ang kawalan ng matitinong mga opisina, kawalan ng editorial independence at masahol na panghimasok ng administrasyon sa bawat publikasyon sa buong PUP. Ngayong araw, kasabay ng pagdiriwang ng Pandaigdigang Araw ng Kalayaan sa Pamamahayag, malinaw ang tindig ng publikasyon sa tungkulin nito bilang magantaliban ng demokrasya. Kaiba sa tradisyonal na media o nakasanayan ng media, ang The Catalyst ay tatalima sa oryentasyon nito bilang progresibo at patuloy na yayakapin ang linyang masa. Kasabay nito, mabigat ang hamon ng bawat mamamahayag pang campus sa administrasyon ni Marcos na kilalanin ang demokratikong karapatan ng iba't ibang sektor ng lipunan, partikular ang mga manggagawang media. Dahil sa huli, pinatunayan ng kasaysayan na tanging sambayanan ang mapagpasya at handa itong bumalikwas sa oras na magpatuloy ang pangangayupapa nito sa imperialistang interes ng Estados Unidos. Mananatili ang publikasyong ito bilang mapanghamon at kontraagos hanggat may pananamantala sa lipunan at manggagawang media, patuloy pa rin ang paglaban sa inustisya. Defend press freedom.
Maraming salamat kay Editor-in-Chief John Robert De Castro sa kanyang speech, no? Lahat tayo rito ay tumitindig para sa kalayaan sa pamamahayag bilang ehersisyo ng ating demokrasya sa ating bansa. Ngunit sa kasalukuyang konteksto, in the current context of the Philippine nation, the press have been discriminated, not only discriminated but defaced, and not only that, but red tagged as enemies of the state. It serves as a bigger challenge for us as journalists to fight back and break these barriers and be at the forefront of defending the truth and especially democracy. Kaya ngayon, tinatawag ko muli si Mr. Manny Mogato, si Ms. Kathyrine Cortez, si Mr. Archie Bergosa at si Mr. John Robert De Castro upang buksan ang kanilang mga camera. Kasi ngayon, sa ating pag-break ng barriers, tayo naman ngayon ay magkakaroon ng roundtable discussion along with the questions from all of the people that have submitted their questions, no, in this critical time. Kaya naman, no, sa pagbukas ng kanilang mga camera, tinatanong ko ang lahat ng ating mga audiences dito sa Zoom ngayong araw, alive pa ba kayo? I-send nyo naman ang inyong mga reaction buttons ng inyong pag-alab para sa World Press Freedom Day. Ayan, nakikita natin all of the hearts that the audiences have given, the raised fist that we can see, no? All of us, no, have bigger prospects of the journalism field and what it is in the future. So this is the first question. Anyone from our esteemed guests can answer our questions. So this is the first question. Today's theme for the 30th World Press Freedom Day is shaping a future of rights, freedom of expression as a driver for all other human rights. Why do you think freedom of expression of a journalist is integral in paving many more demands and campaigns of our community? Anyone of our esteemed speakers can add or answer this provoking question of freedom of expression?
Kayang-kaya ni Kat yan.
Mr. Manny?
Si Kat muna. Ladies first.
Miss Kat, kayo raw po muna.
Ladies first. Good. I think it's very important matagal nating sinasabi na yung freedom of information ay kakambal lagi yan ng freedom of the press. And if we don't have that democracy, anong mangyayari sa atin? Paano natin malalaman yung mga simple things and big things, lalo na in the government, in general, na kailangan malaman ng tao. Hindi usapin kung paano natin ito pinaglalaban, no? Ang importante, lahat dapat ay kinikilala itong importansya ng freedom of information na backbone ng freedom of the press, no? Kasi nakikita na natin ngayon yung mga effect. Mula nung in the past administration, nakita na natin yung effect na kapag merong curtailment sa freedom of our information, a lot of things will be limited to the public, no? Yung access to information natin, yung access ng media to gather important data, important information para sa pagbabalita, and then yung kawalang respeto na din, no, sa media in general. So I think diyan mag-uugat lahat yan kaya kailangan natin at the very least ay maging aware at the same time, although matagal na natin itong ginagawa, pero kailangan pa nating palakasin yung unity within our ranks to always defend itong usapin na ito dahil malaki to. As a fourth state, no, importante kapag ito yung nawala, alam na natin kung ano yung magiging epekto, since meron na nga tayong mga buhay na karanasan mula nung halimbawa isang magandang assessment point yung mga nangyari noong campaign, no, during the election. Marami sa mga kasama natin sa media nawalan ng access, and kapag nawalan ng access, walang mapag-uusapan, walang malilimit yung opinion, malilimit yung karapatan ng mga mamamayan. So I think Sir Manny can also add doon sa sinabi ko. Mas mas meron
Yes,
siyang
Mr. Manny.
Alam mo, nakita natin ang epekto, no, nung ginagawa ng ating pamahalaan sa ating media, no. Una, naging marahas ang response ng ating pamahalaan, no. Sinara ang ABS-CBN, ang isa sa pinakamalaking broadcast network sa bansa. Ang nangyari nagkaroon ng chilling effect, no. Maraming organisasyon, no, television, radyo at mga pahayagan ang natakot, no, kasi kung nagawa sa ABS-CBN to, pwedeng magawa sa kanila, no. So parang nagkaroon ng self-censorship, no. Hindi man to aminin ng mga kaibigan natin sa industriya, no, na malaki ang role ng mga may-ari, no, ng mga media company sa Pilipinas, no. Yung ating media structure nakadepende diyan sa mga negosyante na nagmamay-ari ng mga broadcast at newspaper, no. Alam niyo naman siguro na ang ABS-CBN Lopez at ang TV5 ay pagmamay-ari ni Manny Pangilinan, no. Pero hindi yung madali para sa mga business owners, no? Kasi nga karamihan ng kanilang negosyo ay naka-regulate, no? Tulad ng mga mining, bangko, airline, power, ano pa, no? Lahat yan regulated industries at ibig sabihin yan, pwede silang ipitin ng pamahalaan anumang oras kung sakaling hindi maganda ang nilalabas ng kanilang mga media organization. No? So ito ay isang malaking balakid sa ating media environment. No? Sinasabi ng iba na ang Pilipinas daw ay may isang malayang pamahayag. No? Pero sa totoo lang, kontrolado ng gobyerno at kontrolado ng mga may-ari kung ano man ang pwede nating ilabas. No? So, mahirap para sa mga ordinaryong mamahayag na gumawa ng isang malaya at independent, no, na reporting kung may parang meron parang humahadlang sa kanila na para gawin ng kailang malayang mamahayag, no? So ang ibig sabihin hindi madali para sa atin ang mag-report ng dapat i-report, isiwalat at i-hold accountable ang ating gobyerno o ating negosyo. No? Ano pong implikasyon nito? No? Kung sakaling may humahadlang sa ating malayang pamahayag, ito ay nakaka-apekto sa ating demokrasya. No? Ang role kasi ng media sa ating lipunan ay maging watchdog, no? Bantayan, no? At habulin at gawing accountable ang lahat ng nasa kapangyarihan. At kung hindi natin magagawa ito ng tama, ng malaya, ay hindi ko alam kung ano mangyayari sa ating bansa, no? So sinasabi ko nga kanina na under threat ang ating media, ang ating mga mamamayan. At lalong naipit dahil sa reaksyon ng publiko na nawawalan na ng tiwala sa atin. Sa oras ng mawalan ng tiwala ang ating mga mamamayan sa ating media, ayoko sanang mauwi ang Pilipinas sa isang sitwasyon na para tayong nasa China, nasa North Korea, o nasa Myanmar na mahirap nang mag-report ng katotohanan. So, ang hinihiling ko lang sa ating mga mamayan ay tulungan ang ating mga journalist, no? Para maibalik ang tiwala ng ating mamayan. Pagkat ito ay importansya sa ating demokrasya.
Thank you, Sir Manny and Ms. Kat, for answering the question. Freedom of expression really is a right that is a democratic right na hindi na dapat kine-question ng bawat isa. At ito ay dapat ine-exercise truthfully. At the same time, we also, as journalists, we critique the truth in itself. No, who are the perpetrators of controlling the truth? In that sense, no, sino ang nambubusal ng katotohanan ng mga naratibo ng mamamayang Pilipino? Okay, baka may add si Mr. Archie at si Mr. Robert. Meron ba kayo ma-add? Ayan, Mr. Archie?
Hello, rinig ba?
Yes,
Hello.
loud and
So
clear.
thank you po Ma'am Kath and Sir Manny for your insights, no. Totoo, no, yung tinatawag nating media bias at some point, because it is really a true dilemma, no, especially in our media landscape, na we are actually compromised by corporate factors. Now we're in, may mga big business owners in behind these media companies, which really affects the way how they do report, because of course they have business interests, no, to protect. So kudos na sa ating mga alternative media na despite for lack of funding and despite the attacks ay na-maintain na yung mga independent reportage. So ayun, yun yung isa sa mga mahalagang role nila na dapat nating tignan. So balik tayo dun sa tinatawag nating freedom of expression. Tapos kasi nga sinasabi nga nila na yung team natin ngayon ngayong taon ay sobrang defining, wherein nakita natin na tinignan talaga na binigyan talaga ng malaking connection yung press freedom at saka yung freedom of expression towards sa pag-push forward no ng iba nating mga karapatan no. Gusto ko lang unang sabihin na kapag ang freedom of the press and ang freedom of expression ay na-stifle, lahat ng mga patayang karapatan natin no, bilang tao no, ay naapektuhan. If meron mang, dahil nga kanina na-touch yung elections, masasabi natin na kung meron mang napatunayan yung past elections, no, it means na parang you can really win no, even without attending the debate. You can really win no, even without actually no, iba na yung naging dating no. Ay hindi na siya yung katulad ng dati. Ang kailangan mo lang ay isang malaking election machinery, name, and syempre yung information wars na yung manalo sa information and propaganda wars. So may kita natin na kung paano yung freedom of expression, especially yung media and yung journalist, ano yung ginagampanan nila doon sa information ecosystem na meron tayo. So unang-una, lahat tayo may right to access to information. Everyone has right to access to information. Ang problem kasi dito no sa social media, especially ngayon sa scene na meron tayo ngayon, yung social media masyado na siyang maingay no. Napakarami ng social media noise na nakikita natin, na nararanasan natin, wherein na-blur din niya yung line between content consumers and content producers. Before kasi, ito yung gusto ko makita natin, no, na before kasi, we used to acquire our news, our stories, sa mga reputable media sources, wherein meron yung strict editorial and ethical standards, which is lagi ko nga sinasabi. Pero ngayon kasi hindi na, no? Kahit sino ngayon, naging publisher na, kahit sino ngayon, pwede na magbalita, no? Pwede na gumawa ng stories. Ngayon yung mga tao, sadly, no, because of that, and the continuous media downplay, they all result na into vloggers, yun na yung pinaniniwalaan nila, yung nakakapag-touch ng mga political bias nila. And ayun no, nakita natin na napakahirap no, dahil journalists right now, they're battling for space sa social media and they're battling for their credibility. And ano nga ba yung essential role no ba't ko ba yung sinasabi? Ano ba yung mga essential role ng journalist doon sa information wars sa sinasabi natin ngayon na ating nararanasan ngayon? Ito kasi yung journalist kasi, lahat kasi may kakayahang magbalita. Lahat kasi may kaya namang magsabi ng storya. But only journalist can actually report something in a factual manner and something that adheres to strict editorial and ethical standards. And I think yun yung essential role nila. No? They can help especially ngayon na sobrang lala ng disinformation and misinformation, they can help verify facts, they can help disseminate the truth, especially doon sa mga tao no, na kailangan yun. They can, given their platforms, they can create and facilitate spaces for discussion wherein pwede nating i-push forward no, yung truth agenda, kung ano nga ba yung tamang narrative. And ayun yung nakikita ko na isang mahalagang relationship ng freedom of expression and press freedom. Kasi kapag hindi malaya yung press, hindi malaya yung media, ang nangyayari ay ganito no, kapag patuloy yung pag-aatake ng estado, kapag hindi malaya yung mga journalist, nagiging ganito no. And ang nananalo, ang nakakalungkot na reality, ang nananalo ay madalas yung false narrative. Ang madalas na nananalo yung yung sabihin nating disinformation and misinformation online. And ayun no, baka may madadagdag din si Robert.
Thank you, Archie, regarding that, no? And at the same time, kasi mula dun sa mga naibabanggit mo, there's a really vast distinction of a true journalist, no? True journalists are in the front lines whenever there is crisis, whenever there is a storm happening. Sila yung nagre-report dyan sa harap natin, live stream. And at the same time, journalists are there in the front lines of our communities in reporting their narratives all throughout the regions. And at kaya imaidadagdag ko rin, I can add what Ms. Kat have said and the other speakers said, that the total shutdowns of independent media outfits or even the media giant ABS-CBN that have really made inaccessibilities from different media outfits in the regions. No, it has affected the line of work that we have in reaching many more masses in the information, the truth itself, and the alternative narrative, which is the truth. No? So, with that being said, no, there is really a big challenge for us as journalists in extending our efforts, our maximum efforts for journalism, right? It's a part of breaking barriers. No, if we exercise freedom of expression, it's actually a big thing. It's a, a general word for us to particularize, but at the same time, it's all about unity. That's why this is my question for Robert. No, so Robert, as from the campus, as you are the editor-in-chief of the Catalyst as in the campus publications, how do you see the future of campus journalists, no, after they graduate? How would they break barriers and serve the journalism that we wanted to adhere for many more years to come?
Ayun 'no, sa context ng hindi lang ng mga campus journalist, kundi ng mga journalism student na rin. Not just in PUP, but in other schools as well. Because I have friends in Cavite State University, University of Santo Tomas, who are also studying Bachelor of Arts in Journalism. Right after Marcos won the 2022 national elections, most of them ay na-demoralized because of the fear na maaaring maulit sa kasaysayan natin. Pero mahalaga dito yung gampanin ng mga teachers, instructors, professionals in motivating the students to persist and to go on, to continue to fight despite of all these happenings around our political climate. Kasi no, mahalaga yung gampanin nila na ipaintindi na kailangan bilang mga kabataan at bilang mga journalist ay tayo yung magpatuloy ng tradisyon, ng kultura ng mga mamamahayag sa bansa. Kasi hindi kailangan maputol ng tradisyon natin na kung paano tayo magbalita, the way we uphold press freedom, and the way we safeguard our democracy here in the Philippines. Right now in the Philippines, nakikita ko naman sa pamamagitan ng mga campus publications, no? Ayan, sa pamamagitan ni na Archie, at ng marami pang publikasyon, hindi lang dito sa Manila but in the provinces as well, no, nagiging militant sila and progressive and critical. The way ng pagre-report nila, they are really challenging the status quo. And I think that's a positive factor in shaping our future in media.
Thank you, Robert, from what you have said. No? And I really think that journalists, even in our campuses or even starting writers, the most important thing that the asset of a journalist is their right to question, di ba? Us as journalists, we always question everything from what we write to where do our ideas come from. And as we progress, no, as we raise our social and political consciousness, we actually integrate ourselves that there is more to what the things that we write, and there are many more narratives that the broader masses need to know and need to be politically aware of. And it is one of the challenges that we face up until now. Kasi nababanggit po kanina regarding sa public trust, regarding sa defacement, regarding sa red tagging, no? These are state attacks that have been orchestrated for years, no? It's hinog yung mga batayan, no? That it's a part of the counterinsurgency against anyone that is against the political ideologies. But us as journalists, where do we stand for? We stand for the truth. And this time we break these barriers in achieving the greater democracy that we pursue years long. That's why this is the last question for our esteemed speakers for today. No, actually, for our speakers, little do you know, that there are audiences from the Southeast Asia region. So we welcome them in our discussion. No, and I hope they are having a great time in this round table and really a thought-provoking answers from our esteemed guests. So this is the final question, and which will be your closing statement as well. This is for many starting journalists, the chilling effect of the rabid shutdown of media outfits and websites, fabricated charges and surveillances, strike fear day by day. What would you advise future journalists on their search for safe spaces in this field and eventually breaking their own barriers? Who would start from our esteemed guest? Miss Kat?
Sir Manny na po.
Hello, ma'am. Sir Manny?
Sir Manny naman.
Gusto ko yung nagtuturoan tayo for today's video. It's a part of breaking barriers, di ba? We're here in Zoom, no? Sir Manny, I think you have a thought in mind. Sir Manny, I think you're on mute.
Yan. Okay. Alam mo, mahirap talaga ang trabaho ng magiging isang journalist, no? Pero unang-una, nagpapasalamat ako at wini-welcome yung ating mga campus journalists na nandito ngayon dahil patuloy silang lumalaban para sa kalayaan ng ating pamamahayan, no? Talagang malaking bagay yan kasi nagsisilbing inspirasyon para sa amin na nandito ngayon sa industriya na gawin din ang kanilang ginagawa, ang kanilang katapatan sa ating hanapbuhay. Hindi kasi madali na lumaban at ipaglaban ang press freedom, no? Maraming problema, maraming balakid, pero ang mayapayo ko lang sa ating mga kapwa journalist at campus journalist at sa mga gusto pang maging journalist sa dating na panahon ay ituloy lamang ang kanilang advokasya, no? Hindi masama na ipaglaban ang freedom of the press, no? Hindi masama na ipaglaban ang ating karapatang pantao. Ang freedom of expression ay isang karapatan na bawat tao ay mayroon. At sa tingin ko, ang pinaka-importanting trabaho o gawain ng isang journalist ay maging totoo, no? At ipaglaban ang public interest, no? Hindi interest ng politiko, hindi interest ng mga negosyante, kundi interest ng nangaraming tao, no? Patuloy tayo na maging tapat sa ating code of ethics, no? Kasi tingin ko ito lamang ang paraan para mabalik natin ang tiwala ng ating mamamayan sa ating profesyon, no? Yung intimidation, yung threats, yung harassment ay hindi maalis yan. Ituring natin itong bahagi ng ating trabaho. Marami naman tayong paraan para protektahan ang ating sarili, na maiwasan ang anumang kapahamakan na darating sa ating buhay, no? Marami tayong pamamaraan, no? Kung tayo magtulong-tulong bilang isang community ng mga journalist, no? So, ang importante ay ituloy natin kung anong ating ginagawa at huwag tayong mawalan ng tiwala sa ating sarili. Pagkat ako'y naniniwala na sa darating na panahon, kung meron mang malakas na disinformation ngayon na nangyayari, no? Kung sinisiraan man at pilit ng sinisira ang ating profesyon, no? Tingin ko darating ang araw na maliliwanagan ang lahat ng tao na ang journalist ay para sa kabutihan ng lahat, para sa ating demokrasya.
Palakpakan naman natin si Sir Manny sa kanyang mga naibanggit, no? It's true though na as journalists, no, we must be staunch defenders of press freedom, and press freedom is democracy in itself. And how about the others, Miss Kat, Mr. Archie, and Mr. Robert?
Okay.
Paano naman kayo? Yan, Miss Kat.
You know, that question, I always consider that as, you know, $1 million question for journalists. You know, reporting in the Philippines is hard, and reporting in the Philippines with bias for the people's interest is even harder. Why? Because it's life-threatening as always, no? But sabi nga ni Sir Manny Mogs, this is part of our job and also a responsibility as, you know, member of the fourth state. Aside from the threat, the harassment na along the way, you know, you can experience that along the way in your journalism. There's also other factors like masyadong mababa ang sahod natin, you know, journalists, masyadong mababa ang sahod. A lot of us here, especially in the provinces, in the regions, doesn't have hazard pay during, you know, for coverage or field reporting, and other factors. So it's very difficult, but it's a leap also to consider journalism as your job, no? Kasi with the existence of fake news, itong disinformation, our role is greater than in the past, no? Parang without us, no? Hindi naman natin sinasabi na tayo lang ang yung may kakayahan na kontrahen itong mga fake news, but being a journalist, this is a very, very important profession to combat fake news. And of course, with our profession, ang laki din ng responsibility to ensure that the democracy in the country will remain, no? Despite and in spite all the efforts naman na you know, misinform yung public. Siguro ako nanggaling din ako sa student publication, and I'm a proud member of the College Editors Guild of the Philippines. No, I'm a guilder. And I really appreciate yung trabaho I really appreciate what did the College Editors Guild of the Philippines, yung ginawa nila sa akin, no, to open my eyes and to see, no, what happened to the basic masses, no, during our yung mga, for example, visits sa community, interviews sa mga affected sectors of the society. So I think it's a leap, no, to go out from the four corners of your university or your classroom and to see, no, the other side of the world where, you know, a lot of people are still into poverty, a lot of people are oppressed, no, yung sinasabing ng oppressed, walang trabaho, pinapatay, ang daming human rights violations. For example, in Luzon right now, ang dami-daming namamatay because of the war on drugs. Even in the media community, there's still killings, a lot of harassments, intimidation, red tagging, etc., etc. Maganda ng step forward yung commitment to go out and see the world, and mas even maganda pa siya kung if you write, no, if you write a story about them. So do not hesitate, no, to tawag yan, para umatras at the same time huwag matakot. Lagit-lagi nandyan, kahit saang trabaho ka, nandyan talaga yung danger. Pero meron namang mga mechanisms, safety mechanisms para mailayo tayo sa danger. Siguro at this very early pa lang na stage ng inyong journalism, always remember what Sir Manny said. Always stick to the standards, ethical standards of journalism. That's number one. And number two, always be biased with the people's interest. Nothing more, nothing less. And always remember to PS, we are not, press statement writers. We are not, PR tawag niyan, arm ng kahit anong politiko, ng kahit anong leader, no? We should be honest and we should stick to the truth, nothing more, nothing less. So yun lang. Thank you very much.
Maraming salamat doon, Miss Kat, no? Kaya nga, join PGP. Anyway, ayun, no, magandang bahagi no, as journalists. Yes, we follow ethical journalism. And second of all, tayo rin, no, we hold the line, nothing more, nothing less. Because at the same time, in this line of work that we have a bigger community na need to hold the line to strengthen the struggle that we fought. So, ayun po, no? How about kay Robert? Ayun, mamiyaan ka.
Ayan, no, siguro lastly before this event ended, I would like to reiterate lang what Miss Kat have said, no? Yung kahalagahan ng collective action among our ranks. Kasi dapat hindi natin makita yung mga sarili natin as professional individuals or individual professionals, but rather we see ourselves as part of the collective struggle of all media practitioners here in our country, because only through collective action we can achieve true democracy. And lastly, of course, there are many student journalists out here. I would like to reiterate that the College Editors Guild of the Philippines is looking for volunteer secretariat, no? All of you are free to join. And sa huli, sa paglabas natin sa akademya, sa pamanasan, nariyan ang unyon ng mga periodista sa bansa natin. Huwag tayong matakot na maging kasangkot, huwag tayong matakot na makiisa, at huwag tayong matakot na pumaloob sa mga unyon sa iba't ibang sektor ng ating lipunan. Dahil sa pamamagitan ng unyonismo, doon natin matatamasa yung ating mga basiko at demokratikong karapatan. Kaya ngayon pa lamang ay bukas yung mga pahayagan, hindi lamang sa loob ng PUPC, kundi sa buong bansa. At hinihikayat namin yung bawat isa na naririto na naway maging parte tayo ng ating paglaban para sa tunay na demokrasya at nakakalaya sa pamamahayag syempre. Yun lamang, Brel. Salamat.
Just a fun fact for everyone, no? I am also the associate editor of The Catalyst. Kaya me and Robert have been in touch as colleagues talaga. And at the same time, no, we have witnessed how really, no, in starting in the campus journalism field, we experienced the rampant red tagging and especially the closure of our pages. And now, no, of what our esteemed speakers have said, susi ang collective action, no, ang kolektibong pagkilos sa lahat ng mga bagay. Hindi natin tatamasa ang tunay na demokrasya ng iisa lamang, kundi kinakailangan ito ng sama-samang pagkilos. So yun po yung pinakasusi ng mga nababanggit ng ating mga esteemed speakers. And at the same time, no, that's what democracy really is, no, its value. Buklod ang bawat isa. How about you, Mr. Archie? No, what advice would you say or receive for our future campus journeys?
Wait lang. Ewan ko kung problem ba yun sa audio ko or sa mic. Pero anyway, before I end, no, before we end, gusto ko lang sabihin sa inyo na yung field of journalism, may it be campus journalism or sa mundo ng professional journalism, it requires a different kind of commitment. And syempre, since karamihan sa atin dito or majority sa atin dito ay students, especially mga freshies, no, or mga sophomores, I would like to reiterate again that our view of journalism ngayon, no, nandito na tayo sa unti-unti na tayong lumalabas, no, sa ating classroom, ay iba, no, sa ating nakagisnan. Alam ko na majority sa atin dito, mga campus journalists, we view campus journalism before as competition. We view campus journalism before as, you know, parang ano, no, for incentives, for clout, or whatsoever. Pero in reality, journalism is not like that. No? Ako, no, personally, no, ganyan ako before. I've competed sa NSPC. Akala ko noon ganun, no? Pero when I slowly entered college, and na-immerse na ako dun ngayon, sinasabi ni Ma'am Kath yung basic masses integration, yung mga BMIs, yung mga yan, yung paglubog sa masa, dun ko na-realize na yung journalism talaga, meron pa siyang ibang facet, no, na hindi natin nakikita kapag tayo ay ganun pa lang, no, kababaw yung pagtingin. So gusto ko na sa atin, before I end, no, laliman natin yung ating pagtingin sa kung ano nga ba yung pamamahayag. Kailangan nating tignan na ang pamamahayag ay higit lang sa kung ano yung nakuha natin sa patimpalak. Ang pamamahayag ay higit lang sa medalya. Ang pamamahayag ay higit pa sa pagkilala, no, na natatanggap natin. No. Ang pamamahayag ay una sa lahat pagtindig sa masa. Ang pamamahayag ay pagtindig sa katotohanan. Ang pamamahayag ay paglaban, no, sa disinformation at misinformation na present ngayon at prevalent ngayon, no, sa ating media landscape. Kailangan committed tayo, no, sa paglaban at pagtayo sa kung ano yung alam nating tama sa kabila ng samot-saring atake, no, sa ating kalayaan sa press freedom, especially sa mga campus journalists, kasama na dyan yung ating kalayaan pang-akademiko, magkarugtong yan. Kailangan nating sirain, no, yung barriers, no, at kailangan nating i-untangle yung chains na pumipigil sa atin sa pagtawag sa ating sarili as malayang mga mamamahayag, as free press. And gusto ko lang din i-reiterate, no, na ang paglaban sa misinformation at disinformation ay multi-sectoral na efforts. Hindi natin yan kaya na tayo lang, no, sa mga journalist. At ang paglaban natin dyan ay hindi sa pamamagitan ng pag-create ng sarili nating mga information bubbles. So ano yung ibig sabihin ko, no, kapag sinabi nating pag-create ng ating mga information bubbles, no? Pag tayo, no, pumasok na tayo sa mundo ng professional media, isa sa mga kinakaharap nating problema ay ang polarized na populasyon, no, wherein social polarization, wherein merong certain factors na dito leaning dito, tapos may kabila naman na leaning dito, no. Dahil nga sa social media algorithms, dahil sa nagkakaroon ng faction yung lipunan, divided na sobra yung ating society, no. So merong social polarization. Isa yan sa mga dapat nating kaharapin, no, maging mapanghabig tayo bilang isang mga journalist na tumindig din sila sa mga katotohanan. Kapag nakita kayo ng someone na biktima ng fake news, someone na biktima ng misinformation, gusto ko na mas laliman ninyo yung pagtingin natin doon. Gusto ko na ating malaman na sila ay biktima lang din, no, ng mga issues, no, na ating kinakaharap. So, wag natin silang ika-cancel, wag natin silang sabihin na, ano ka kasi, deserve, ganyan. So, wag ganun, no? Let's create healthy spaces for discussion. So, I think, sa pamamagitan, no, mas lalo nating ma-amplify yung ating call for press freedom, and yung ating call, no, para mas ating mapalalim at may sabuhay, no, yung ating kalayaan, especially yung ating kalayaan na makapag-express, yung ating freedom of expression. And kasama na dun, syempre, yung ating press freedom. And hindi lang press freedom, let's also stand for academic freedom. Dahil syempre tayo sa mga mamamahayag, no, tayong mga kabataang mamamahayag, katambal yan, no, ng ating kalayaan na mamahayag ay ating kalayaan pang akademiko. So ayun lamang, maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat doon, Archie. Immensely talaga. Because nahagis siya sa lalo na kung paano tayo. Kaya ang usapin ng press freedom ay academic freedom. Malaking bagay makapunta sa panawagan, even press freedom itself and fighting for democracy. Ito mismo ay isang multi-sectoral na issue na intersected sa lahat ng mga sektor ng awa, no? Sila rito, kaisa natin. To end the discussion from Luis V. Teodoro, the late Luis V. Teodoro, which is our pillar of journalism. Journalists, because they deal in information, can help can help populations make sense of what's happening. And no matter how indirectly, can be instrumental in mass decision-making. Journalists, social change. Doon, ating panoorin po ang video mula po sa UNESCO.
The government is using every excuse to silence its critiques.
هي أول ليلة بتبقى أصعب ليلة، هي بتنام جوا السجن بتبقى صعبة بتبقى طويلة.
I suppose they wanted me to shake and feel their power.
Aquí no vuelves a hablar, aquí no vuelves a entrar, no vas a volver a informar. Y lo que hicieron ustedes y lo que hiciste tú precisamente fue pararse muy fuerte y decir, voy a seguir informando.
There's another sign behind it that is completely talking over.
Yes, I need to go down.
Now, we may request our beloved reactors for today. These are future journalists from the Communicator. This is Miss Sharona Nicole Semilia of PUP Journalism Guild and Mr. Randolph Aaron Resueño from the Communicator. Let's give them a round of applause for their short manifestations of today's event.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Sharon Nicole Similia from the PUP Journalism Guild. I am currently the Public Relations Officer. And yeah, the inputs of our speakers were really on point with regards to the state of the Philippine press. But I would like to take this platform as I am speaking about my insights on the future of Southeast Asian journalism. To invoke other Filipinos as well as other nationalities here to learn that our stand for press freedom should not only be clouded with our own nation, with our own state, because journalism expands beyond the Philippine barriers, beyond the Philippine roots. So, from Bill Heaton's article, he said that the media in Southeast Asia faces two problems: vaguely worded laws that motivate politically motivated abuse, and the absence of robust, independent courts willing to challenge these governments. So I think from the press-con perspective, we learn in the DSPC, RSPC, NSPC that journalism is about truth-telling. But it is more than that. And I agree with our speakers that in journalism, we must be rooted in having real actions, in having real stands, because we are biased to the truth, only in the truth. So um, yeah, let us stand not only with the Philippines, but also with our neighboring ASEAN countries like Myanmar, who face censorship, impunity, and threats. And I think that the future of Southeast Asian journalism is not exactly a walk in the park because we constantly face challenges, problems, dilemmas. But it is in the hope of the journalists with us, before us, and of course within us, that I trust that the Southeast Asian journalism will continue to prevail. And at the end, like how history always shows, the people, the journalists, it is in us that we find our footing in reclaiming what is true, what is genuine, and what is right for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Miss Sharona. How about you, Mr. Randolph?
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Randolph Malarespeño, the current news editor of the Communicator. And I would like to start sa point na nagsimula po ang ideya ng ipagdiwag ang World Press Freedom Day sa pagkilala na ang freedom of speech and expression ay ang driver nga po ng iba pang mga pangunahing karapatang pantao. And then sabi na rin po ng UNESCO na it is not incidental that freedom of speech comes first, as this fundamental freedom is one of that enables the others. So on the perspective naman po kung bakit napunta na ang spotlight ng pamamahayag sa Pilipinas, sa kaliwat ka ng atake po mula sa pamahalaan, mula sa pagpapatigil ng mga operasyon, mga franchises ng ABS-CBN sa pag-block ng higit mga more than 25 online sites ng mga alternative media tulad ng Bulat at Pinoy Weekly, sa mga walang tigil na red tagging at paghuhuli sa mga journalists during ng mga peaceful assemblies tulad ng mga ating mga student leaders tulad nila Joan Pagkalingawan at nila Gabriel Magtibay ng stand-up UP. And then ayun. So in this sense, so nagre-reflect nga po yung stats, nagre-reflect yung mga actions natin, mga oppression. Let's start back from 2021, nasa 130th tayo sa World Press Freedom Index, and then nag-decrease noong 2022 to 147 at buti na nung balik ngayon 2023 sa 132nd. So attack on journalists and media practitioners nga po is are an attack to the freedom of expression. So ano nga po ba ang future ng journalism ng Pilipinas? So paano nga po ba manunumbalik ang tiwala ng mga Pilipino sa isang lipunang naniniwala pa rin sa mga vloggers and bloggers? So yun pinoint out nga po ni Sir Archie na anyone can be a publisher, storytellers nga po in the realm of citizen journalism, and journalists are still battling for space and create a space for our platform as credible sources of information. And then, and pinantat din po ni Kuya Robert de Castro na many student journalists are demoralized by the fear of the past. So, as student journalists nga po, on behalf of the Communicator, tayo ang papatuloy ng tradisyon ng mga mahayag, and then it is really tayo po yung kakalampag at nagpapatuloy na hubugin ang kinabukasan ng media sa ating bansa. So the Filipino media must be free and autonomous in order to carry out the crucial function of our job. The media must work to engage in its intended audiences rather than alienate them in the face of technological changes and intolerable governments that threaten their very existence and relevance. Kuha na lang din po ako ng official statement ng aming publication sa mga nakaraang issue sa press freedom. Ang media ay nagsisilbi sa taong bayan, hindi sa mga makapangyarihan. Napatunayan ng media na hindi magpapagapi ang katotohanan sa kadiliman. Magsisilbing liwanag ang malawak na hanay ng media sa kadilimang dulot ng kasinungalingan, korupsyon, karahasan, pandaraya at tahasang pangloloko. Patuloy ang pagtutok at pagsulat ng mga nagkakaisang mga periodista para sa isang tunay at makamasang pagbabago sa bansa. To write is already to choose po. But we cannot act alone. On this day and forth, the Communicator, along with its staffers, stand with solidarity for the long-lasting fight for freedom of expression in the press. Just like Sir Alexander Clem said earlier, the freedom of expression, the freedom of the press is a precious good that is worth fighting for. Defend press freedom, and as we say in the COM, serve the students, seek the truth, padayon at isang mapagpalayang araw sa atin.
Maraming salamat kina Sharona Nicole Semilia ng PUP Journalism Guild at ni Randolph Aaron Resueño ng The Communicator. Palakpakan naman natin ang ating mga campus journalists mula sa kanilang mga pahayagan. At gayon din, it's true, to write is already to choose. And this time, we defend our line. We break barriers and we assert press freedom. That's why for the closing remarks, we may call on Mr. Kim Bernard Fajardo, the SEAMSA Media and Democracy SIG Head and PUP Department of Broadcast Communication Chairperson. Give him a round of applause, please.
Thank you, Brel, for that introduction. Thank you to everyone. As we come to the close of this event, World Press Freedom Day 2023, we are reminded of the vital role that journalists play in upholding the principles of freedom of expression and democracy. Today's webinar, Breaking Barriers, Journalists as Catalysts of Freedom of Expression, has been an important opportunity to reflect on the challenges faced by journalists in the Philippines and in the Southeast Asia, and discuss the role of the media in promoting democracy and protecting human rights. We have heard from some exceptional speakers today, including Pulitzer Award-winning journalist and editor-at-large of OneNews PH, Sir Manuel Mogato, Vice Chairperson of the National Union of Journalists in the Philippines, Ms. Cortez, the EIC of Explain PH and EIC of the Catalyst, Sir Archie Bergosa and John Robert de Castro. Their insights and experiences have been invaluable in helping us to understand the current state of journalism in the region and the challenges that lie ahead. We have learned that the future of journalism in the Philippines and in the Southeast Asian region is at a critical juncture, as journalists face increasing threats to their safety and security, as well as restrictions on their ability to report freely and independently. However, we have also heard inspiring stories of journalists who continue to persevere in the face of these challenges and who are working tirelessly to promote democracy and human rights. As we move forward from this event, it is clear that there is much work to be done to protect the freedom of the press and to ensure that journalists can work without fear and reprisals or intimidations. It is our collective responsibility to support and defend the rights of a journalist and to promote a culture of free and open journalism that is essential for a healthy and vibrant democracy. Finally, we would like to extend our sincere thanks to our esteemed guest speakers, our partners from the PUP and the Southeast Asian Media Studies Association, or SEAMSA, PUP Journalism Guild and the Communicator, and to those who have joined us today for this important discussion. May we continue to work together to break down barriers and to uphold the principles of freedom of expression and democracy for all. Para sa medyang malaya at medyang mapagpalaya. Defend press freedom. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat.
Maraming salamat. PUP Department of Broadcast Communication, Chairperson, Mr. Kim Bernard Fajardo. Bago muna tayo umalis sa ating programa ngayong araw, tayo ay magkaroon ng photo opportunity. Ayan, maaaring buksan ang ating mga camera. Kung hindi kayang makapagbukas ng kanilang mga camera, maaari lamang na bindutin ang reaction button, taas kamao na reaction button. That symbolizes that we will persist in defending press freedom. Sige po, so tech, kung maaari lamang po ay to guide. Ayan, nagbubuka. Does everyone open their camera? We request everyone to open their cameras. Yes. How about the others? Special mention kay Mr. Preston Suyat of the Department of Journalism. Hello, sir. Ayan po. Okay. We can take a picture po. Ayan. Okay, we can take a picture. Sabi lang po ng 3, 2, 1. And at the same time, for those who are open camera, we can raise our fist. Ayan, as in solidarity in defending press freedom. We can raise our left fist. Okay, in 3, 2. Okay, Kim, Mr. Kim, you will.
Yeah.
Ayan.
Okay, in 3, 2, 1.
In the count.
Okay. For the next panel, 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Brel.
Yan. We thank everyone for participating in Breaking Barriers, Journalists as Catalysts of Freedom of Expression, a webinar organized by Polytechnic University of the Philippines, PUP, and the Southeast Asian Media Studies Association, Media and Democracy, SIG, and together with the Communicator and PUP Journalism Guild. Kahit man tayo ay nagse-celebrate ng 30th World Press Freedom Day, hindi ibig sabihin na dito lamang natatapos ang ating laban para sa malayang pamamahayag. Araw-araw, every day, we fight for press freedom and democracy. This is Brel Serna, the national spokesperson of the College Editors Guild of the Philippines, ang nag-iisa, pinakamalawak at pinakamatatag na organisasyon ng kalipunan ng mga kampus pahayagan. Sumulong, sumulat, manindigan at magmulat. Maraming salamat po sa lahat. Sumali po tayo sa mga pahayagan. Palakpakan po natin ating mga sarili.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Salamat.
Thank you, Sir Manny, Miss Kat.
Thank you, Kim.
Archie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clem.
Well, thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brel, thank you so much. I know you have an event pa. Bye-bye, Brel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you so much po. Ingat po kayo.